So today's presentation is about the new ECMPS tool and what we know currently about it, and things are going to be taking off in the next week regarding this new tool. So we're here today to share with you what I currently know what's going on. So with that being said, let's move forward. What's the new tool? Well, it's called ECMPS 2.0. It's the ECMPS reengineering program by the CAMD group or the Clean Air Markets Division. Chris Worley of the EPA gave a Zoom presentation during the fall users group meeting back about a month ago. Today is a repeat of Chris's presentation. As you're going to see this in another minute or so, Chris's presentation was videotaped by us and is available on our website for you to actually review his presentation. And today's presentation is going to be a summary of what Chris provided. First off, we want to talk about the beta testing. We'll begin on the monitoring plan portion of the new tool starting 1 week from today on December 14th. We, the users of that new tool, are still waiting for updated reporting instructions. And the DAS vendors are still waiting for the schema. And the schema is basically the instructions on telling the DAS vendors how the new formatted files should be structured. And so the DAS vendors have not received that yet. And so once we receive that, they can begin updating their software to produce the new JSON formatted files according to the schema results. And initially, you will not be able to import or export files, but you'll be able to modify the monitoring plan files. And the opportunity to import and export those files will come in the spring of 2022. So that will be, that functionality will become available in about 2 to 3 months. And again, Chris Worley's presentation that we recorded that occurred during the users group meeting can be found at this link that I've shown on your screen at the moment. So if you want to actually listen to his whole presentation, you can go here and you can listen to it, like we said before. And I believe his presentation is about 1 hour and 20 minutes long, give or take a few minutes. And so it's available for anybody who wants to hear it in its entirety. Let's talk about a brief overview of the ECMPS reengineering process. Chris did share with us some screenshots of the new tool, and the new screens look very similar to the screens of the existing tool. He encourages everybody to participate in beta testing, and that will begin, like I said, next week on the monitoring plan records. And the beta testing process is really vital to help you begin transitioning to using the new tool. Beta testing initially will be just for the monitoring plan records, but it will transition into both beta testing of the quality assurance records and the emission records that will begin probably in the spring of 2022. And then using the ECMPS tool will become mandatory in January of 2023 for the data that's recorded in 2023. So if you are doing any sort of QA testing like GRADAs, linearities, and things like that in 2023, you'll be able to use the ECMPS tool to upload and submit those records to the EPA's host computer system using the new system in 2023. And then in April of 2023, when you begin submitting your hourly emission files for the first quarter of 2023, again, you'll need to use the new tool for that period. So beta testing during this time is really important to help you work out any bugs or any deficiencies and to improve your understanding. And lastly, the new MATS reporting records will be required starting in the first quarter of 2024 for any submission records that are recorded or performed in 2024. We'll talk a little bit more about this in the next coming slides. So starting in January 2024, those units, those emission units that are using SEMS or mercury traps to demonstrate compliance will have new reporting requirements. Some examples of this, of these new reporting requirements, are the quality assurance checks that are required for example, PM/CEM systems, such as the absolute correlation audit or other quality assurance checks. So far, those checks have not been required to be submitted to the EPA by anybody, but starting in January of 2024, those checks, when they are performed, they will need to be included in the quality assurance records, and they will be required to use the new tool to make the submissions. Also, the new MATS reporting records will be required starting in the first quarter of 2024 for those operations performed in 2024. An example of these new MATS reporting requirements are like the 30 boiler operating day averages. Previously, people have been required to submit those in a PDF file and submit them separately to the EPA. But now, starting in 2024, those 30-day averages will be actually included in the hourly emission records, and those averages will be included in the EDR files. So it's a big change that will be required of people, and that people need to be ready for that. And the beta testing period in 2023 is a great opportunity to practice evaluating those records using the new tool and getting ready for making them electronically submittable. Moving on, one topic that needs to be finalized in the near term is whether or not the new ECMPS tool will continue to support the generation of LME emission records. Currently, you can use ECMPS to generate the LME files, and it does not require any special software. So you can use the current tools to generate these files. But there has been some question whether or not the new tool will continue to support the functionality of generating those files. And Chris Worley has said that they will send out a survey in 2022 to determine the impact of not including the LME functionality in the new ECMPS tool. During the most recent presentation session that occurred during a user group back in November, a number of people pointed out to Chris that if the LME functionality is not maintained in the new ECMPS 2.0 tool, it will force them to purchase software for their existing DAS to continue generating the LME files. But many people point out to Chris that the cost of purchasing this new software is not included in their budgets for 2022, and that the budget window for making funds available for purchasing the software has already passed, and typically utilities have a budget cycle which closes in the summer of the preceding year. So if the ECMPS tool does not continue the functionality for generating these LME files, that people will have to go out and purchase software in addition to their DAS to continue this functionality, and yet they did not budget any money for the 2022 time period to do this. And so this looks like this might be a real issue for how this functionality is going to continue going forward. Now let's talk about what's going to happen here at ESC Spectrum. Both the PRISM and StackVision software applications will be updated with a new file generation engine to create the JSON files, the JSON formatted files for both the QA and emission files. And both applications will be able to generate both types of emission files in both the old XML format and in new JSON format. And they will also be updated to accept JSON formatted monitoring plan files and QA files that potentially may be created in the new ECMPS tool. And again, let me just point out that beta testing of the JSON formatted monitoring plan files begins next week. And the ESC Spectrum is still waiting, like we said before, to get their hands on the new schemas for these formats to be released by the EPA. And the schema, in case you're not familiar with it, is literally the roadmap that tells a DAS vendor how to format the records in the new file format. So we are still waiting for EPA to tell us how the files have to be formatted so that they will be acceptable to the new tool. And people have asked me, well, how would you test the functionality of the new tool? And I'm going to share with you in a minute here what I think, what I would do going forward. During the beta testing periods, I would think that customers could generate a QA file using the existing XML format and then evaluate that file in the existing XML format in the ECMPS tool until it's clean. And at that point in time, you'll know that the database within your DAS is now set up correctly. Then generate the same data file in the JSON format and evaluate it in the new ECMPS 2.0 tool. And you would expect that the evaluation report from the new tool, the ECMPS 2.0, would also produce at that point in time a clean evaluation report. Because you've already used the old tool to verify that your database is clean and properly set up. And so therefore the new tool should return a very similar report. And if the two evaluation reports are not the same, then something's amiss between the existing tool and the new tool. And that would give you the opportunity to either figure out what's going wrong or to get back to the Canada group and find out what's not quite correct. So that's how I think I would do that, at least initially for the QA files. And then when it came time to the emission files, the same process that I just described would also be appropriate for evaluating an emissions file in the XML format through the existing ECMPS tool. So once that's clean, then go back and generate a identical JSON formatted file for the emission records and run that through the new tool. And that file then should evaluate cleanly. So this is how I think that I would go through the process of comparing the functionality and the performance of the two tools, the existing ECMPS tool and the new ECMPS 2.0. Now, let me also share with you that the ECMPS 2.0 tool, that the current profile of checks will be maintained and that no new checks are being added. This is what Chris Worley has said several times during their various presentations, that they really are interested at the moment of just moving the existing functionality from the old tool into the new tool, and that during this transition, they do not intend to add any new functionality. And that during the 2023 time period, the new MATS related reporting requirements will be added to PRISM and to StackVision for beta testing purposes. It will not initially be there. Those reporting requirements will not initially be there, but the beta testing phase begins for those phases. Then ECMPS will then ESC Spectrum will add that functionality into the tool as software applications for PRISM and StackVision. And again, during this time period, during 2023, it's an excellent time to work through the challenges of generating these new formats of files in both the PRISM and StackVision systems and using the new evaluation tools that will be found in ECMPS 2.0. So I can't encourage people enough to participate in the beta testing of these new file formats during this time period. So let's move on a little bit and back up for a second. I want to point out that ECMPS 2.0 is a new web-based tool accessed through the CDX gateway. And ECMPS is not yet released, but they will post instructions how to acquire a CDX login account. And here I've actually listed the website for accessing the CDX system. And on the next page, you're going to see, the next page of this presentation, you're going to see what the CDX homepage looks like. So here is a screenshot that I did yesterday of this Central Data Exchange, or the CDX gateway. Also, there are other web pages that you can go to for support during this process. And here I've listed the website for the ECMPS tool, and where you can find the homepage for that. And within the ECMPS support page, there is a specific section for the re-engineering process, and I list that web page here as well. And so in the next two pages, I'm also going to show screenshots of those two web pages. And so here is the ECMPS support homepage, and I've tried to indicate where the instructions are, or the information is for the re-engineering process. And actually, it's not quite where the red arrow is. It's actually a little bit to the right on the screen, you can see here. And this is where my mouse is showing you that the re-engineering information can be found. And we go on to the next page, and here is the individual page for the re-engineering information. And you can see that there's actually two subcategories. One is stakeholder recordings that Chris and others at CAMD are presenting of their webinars, and that there's also a section for frequently asked questions. And so if you have any questions about the ECMPS transition, this is where I recommend that you go to get the latest information about the changes that are being proposed. Now, there's one last issue that I want to bring up to everybody, and currently this topic has been kind of forgotten, but I want to bring it to your attention, is that in 2024, if you are a MATS reporting facility, that there are new and additional MATS reporting requirements of data related to the stack testers, as they do their stack testing to support the data collection that's required by the MATS rule. The data that they collect and the results from that data collection need to be submitted to the EPA in the new JSON formatted files, and they should be providing that information to you in those JSON formatted files. And so you need to be aware of the fact that they need to provide this information to you, and so that you can upload those files to EPA using the ECMPS 2.0 tool at that time. And so I want to bring it to your attention that you need to make sure that the stack testers are aware of this new requirement coming their way, that in 2024, as they do this testing for you, that as a result of that testing, they need to provide the data files for the testing that they're performing to you, so that you can upload that information to the EPA. So I'm sure we'll be talking more about this in the future as we get closer, but I wanted to bring it to your attention today so that you can mention it to your stack testers and ask them what are they doing in preparation for this new report generating requirement. With that being said, I'm going to open it up at this point in time for any questions.
So the first one we have is, please remind me how someone can participate in the ECMPS beta testing if you do not currently have an EPA login. Most of users do not have a login.
Chris Worley has told us that they will post instructions to the web page that I showed you a couple of slides ago, telling you how to obtain a CDX user and login password. I would expect that would show up in the next week or so. when that information becomes available and the beta period and the beta testing period begins. So if you do not currently have access, I would suggest going to that web page. Let me see if I can go back to it. Yep, here where we talk about the re-engineering information, I would expect you're going to find information posted here, probably under the frequently asked questions section, that will tell you how to obtain a username and to set up a password for accessing the new tool. Next question, please.
Next, we have, how can a DAS vendor create a JSON file if a schema hasn't been shared with the DAS vendors?
The answer is they can't. And that's been what's been holding back ESC Spectrum so far. And the fact that the schema, which tells the DAS vendors how the QA and emission files should be structured and produced. So once the EPA releases the schema, then the DAS vendors can go about setting up their software to generate the JSON files in the properly structured so that a file can be accepted and processed by the new tool. So once the schema is released, then the DAS vendors can go forward. Next question.
If we already have a login for CEDRI, will this be the same login for ECMPS 2.0?
I really don't know. I really can't answer that question. We're going to have to wait and see how this rolls out to everybody in the next week or so. So I would guess my suggestion is to stay in touch, stay informed, and let's see what happens for you if you already have that access.
Why are the EPA dragging their feet regarding LME?
To be very honest, I really don't know. I'm going to guess that the EPA does not know what percentage of LME reporting facilities actually use ECMPS to generate those LME files versus whether those files come from a DAS, a separate DAS. So for example, I believe that Chris Worley has said that the EPA knows there are about 400 units out there that qualify for the LME status and for using the file structure related to the LME units. But they don't know of those 400 if only 50 or 300 or what percentage of those reporting units are actually reliant upon the ECMPS tool to generate those files, or are they relying upon their own DAS systems? And I think they're kind of dragging their feet because they think it's a small number of people, and the additional cost for them to maintain that functionality in the new tool is in question for them. So I'm looking forward to Chris sending out a survey so he can get an idea of what the percentage actually is of the LME reporting units that rely upon the existing ECMPS tool to help him make his decision upon where they should invest their resources. So I hope my answer is helpful for you.
Alrighty. Regarding existing data in ECMPS, will these need to be manually reloaded into ECMPS 2.0 via JSON?
My understanding of the process that's going to occur is no, that the EPA themselves will copy over all the existing data that you submitted previously in the XML format into the new tool, so that your entire emissions history will be kind of initially resident in both systems. And that going forward, starting in 2023 and then in 2024, you'll be submitting your ongoing QA and emissions data in the JSON format to the new ECMPS 2.0 tool and database, and the existing data records in the old database will cease to be populated. And they'll be there probably for a while, and eventually will go away as EPA makes the full transition to the new tool and the new database. So I hope that answers your question about what's going to happen.
All right. Would the JSON file for MAT stack testing or perhaps another format be pulled into the DAHS, then exported in the overall QA file that is generated to be pulled into ECMPS 2.0?
I'm going to share with you my opinion of what's going to happen. And my opinion is no, that the JSON formatted records related to the stack testing that is being done for you does not need to be pulled into your DAS. That because it's that information is not necessarily relevant to your results that you're going to submit. This is all data that's related to what QA checks that they perform, that the stack testers perform on their reference method equipment to validate that reference method data that they generated in support of your RADAs or other stack testing work. And so I do not believe, it is of my opinion, that you do not need to import that data into your DAS, whether it be Prism or StackVision, and then uploaded through a file generated by the DAS to ECMPS 2.0, that the file your stack tester gives you will stand alone by itself, and it will be evaluated by ECMPS 2.0, and if clean and without error, then it gets uploaded separately to EPA's host computer system. I think it should be done this way because if it would be imported into the Prism or StackVision application, if there's any errors or whatever else because of the format, then we would have to, the DAS vendors would have to clean it up. Where if that information is kept separate, then if there was any deficiencies or formatting issues or whatever else, by keeping that information and file separate from the DAS itself, then you would be able to distinguish the difference and then go back to your stack testers and say, hey, your file is not complete or it's not acceptable, and here are the issues with it. This is why beta testing is going to be especially important, because for the first time you're dealing with importing and evaluating data from the stack testers in a way that you've never done before. So I hope that my thoughts of how this can be processed will help you understand what's going to happen next. Next question, Reagan.
All right. What software can we use to read the JSON files? We currently use Altova XML Spy to read XML files. Is there a similar software for JSON files?
To be honest, I have no idea what software applications out there can help you read these new files. That's something you have to first go back to your IT department to find out from them what tools or applications are approved by them to be used on your network for handling these files. But I personally do not know of anything. I can certainly talk to our IT department and find out what they might recommend people use, whether it be Notepad or whatever to look at these files. But I would strongly suggest you go back to your IT department to find out what types of tools are available for reading JSON files that they approve and allow you to use.
All righty. I already have a CDX username and password. When will ECMPS 2.0 beta show up? Will it show up on my CDX home screen, or a different location? Will there be a link to it if it does not show up on my CDX home screen?
The answer to your question is I really don't have an answer for you. I don't know how that's all going to work. You're going to have to stay tuned in and see how things work out. Again, the re-engineering information page that I'm showing you on the screen right now is probably where I'm going to go look. Probably each day coming up in the near term to get the latest information. So to answer your question, I'm sorry, but I really can't answer it because I don't know whether or not your existing username and password is what you need to have going forward for this effort. So stay tuned and keep checking this homepage in front of you.
Is the EPA scheduling a webinar prior to deploying the beta version for the monitoring plan?
Not that I'm aware of it. They have not indicated that they were planning on having any additional webinars. I would expect them in the 2022 time period next year to have a couple of stakeholder meetings. And as you see on the screen already, they've had some in the past. So I would anticipate that they would have some in the future, but I do not know how many, nor do I know when they would have them.
What are the basic differences between the structure of the JSON files and the currently used files? Is there any information on this?
Actually, unfortunately, the answer is no. They have not provided any information describing the difference of the files, nor do I personally know any differences. You're just going to have to wait and find out when the instructions and information comes out on December 14th.
Do you have an estimate date for when a decision on the LME capability will be made? If they don't include it in the new software, we will need time to get another method to create an LME file for our emissions.
I do not have an idea. I have no idea at all when the decision will be made or announced about whether the new ECMPS tool will continue the LME file generation functionality. I wish it was immediately, as we pointed out, and as a number of people pointed out to Chris Worley during his presentation at the user group meeting, that if the functionality is not maintained in the new tool, that those people who are LME reporters will probably have to talk to their DAS vendors and secure a new software module for generating those new files, and that will cost some additional funds, and that the funding for software acquisitions in 2022 and 2023, that money has already been, that budgeting period has already occurred and gone. And so if that functionality is not maintained by the EPA and people are forced to go out and talk to their DAS vendors about switching over to using DAS, to use Prism or StackVision to generate that will cause an additional expense for those users that they had not budgeted for. So basically, we do not know when that will occur, and I wish it was already decided. I privately have campaigned to Chris that they need to continue the functionality, that people have relied upon it, and to not continue that functionality in the new tool will be a burden, an unexpected burden on many people that will not be happy. Next question.
Is there going to be a quote unquote sandbox for the beta testing prior to going live on the web?
I think the beta testing period that's going to be going on between now being December 14th of 2021 and the production going live in January of 2023 will be the quote unquote sandbox that you're talking about. That this beta period is when you can test it, you can try it, you can use it on your existing, on the existing data records that are already submitted to EPA. You'll be able to make modifications to your monitoring plan records and see how that works. You'll be able to do the comparison of QA files and emission files that I described in my slides to familiarize yourself with the functionality between the two different tools. And let me also again point out that the EPA does not intend to add any new tests or checks during this transition period. They are merely interested in transitioning the existing checks and tests from the existing tool to the new tool, and that if there's a need, and if there's a need to make any changes, it's going to be to fix bugs or deficiencies that they overlooked as they made the transition from the old tool to the new tool, and that no new checks will be added to the new tool until at least 2024, and those new checks first and primarily will be those already outlined in the MATS reporting instructions for those units that are MATS reporting units. So I hope that answers your question.
All right, this is kind of a two-parter. I guess the benefit of first importing the MATS testing data into the DHS is that file formats other than JSON could perhaps be accommodated. Is it really practical for all of the individual testers to create JSON files directly?
Reagan, can you read that question again, please?
Yes, I can. All right. Jason Prentice is saying, I guess the benefit of first importing the MATS testing data into the DAHS is that file formats other than JSON, i.e. .csv or text, could perhaps be accommodated. Is it really practical for all of the individual testers to create JSON files directly?
My response, if I understand your question correctly, is it is vital that the stack testers create JSON formatted files for their information that's required to be submitted. That if they don't do it, you will have to do it yourself. And it is far better to have the stack testers create the JSON files with the information that they're required to supply. And instead of having you rely upon your DAS system to generate those files. The DAS vendors collect the information that's going to be required related to their stack testing efforts, and they'll have that information available to them. And therefore, if they only supply it to you in a paper format, let's say, you will have to hand enter that same information into the DAS so that that information can be submitted to EPA in a JSON formatted file. And so to me, by requiring you to hand enter that information into your DAS, whether it be PRISM or StackVision, opens up the potential for data entry errors. You just might key it in wrong. And so therefore, the smarter way to do it, in my opinion, is require the DAS vendor to give you the information from their testing that's required in the JSON formatted file, and to separately evaluate that file from the stack testers in the new ECMPS 2.0 tool to make sure it is formatted correctly and to make sure that it meets the schema requirements without introducing the DAS to that file. So I hope my response answers your question and clarifies it. If not, you can certainly give me a call or email me at the email address or phone number listed on the screen right now for further discussion about this topic.
All
Next
right.
question, please.
Will ESC Spectrum, oh, sorry, I just scrolled too much. Will ESC Spectrum let us know when they have the schema ready to go so we can do beta testing?
Yes, I'm gonna answer that question on behalf of the development team and say that when they have updated the software to begin receiving the JSON files and exporting the appropriate JSON files, that there will be an announcement sent out to all the users telling them that it's ready for testing. And again, we're still waiting for the reporting instruction, the updated reporting instructions to be made available. We're waiting for the schema to become available so that we know how to program or update Prism and StackVision so that it can generate the JSON type format files in the proper format when the things are ready. So yes, I would expect that ESC Spectrum is going to send out an announcement when they're ready.
Okay.
Next question.
If we have a reporting contract with ESC Spectrum and currently just take the XML files and upload to ECMPS without manipulating them, will we see much of a difference with this change?
I'm going to give you my personal answer, and my personal answer is no. You will probably see no change. That at the end of the day, if ESC Spectrum is generating currently if ECMPS is generating your QA and hourly emission files for you and turning those files over to you at the end of the quarter, I would anticipate there may be some dialogue between yourself and ESC Spectrum on when the transition would be for generating JSON files, and that eventually at the end of the whole transition process, instead of receiving an XML file from ESC Spectrum, that you will receive a JSON file from them. But with that being said, I would strongly urge you to evaluate during this transition the new files that are being generated and make sure that you are comfortable with the new JSON file formats. As a utility, you have to remember that you have the liability, you hold the liability for providing the information to EPA in the file format specified by EPA. And even though ESC Spectrum is doing this for you, because you still hold the liability for that, I would think that the smart thing for you to do is to work with ESC Spectrum to generate QA files and quarterly emission files in both formats, the XML and JSON files, and evaluate them in their respective tools to assure yourself that the DAS has been updated to generate the files in the correct format and that they are being processed by the new tool acceptably. So in the end, I don't think there'll be much of a change for you, but it will involve some work on your part to assure yourself that the software, the Prism or StackVision software, has been updated properly and successfully to generate JSON files that are acceptable to the new tool of ECMPS 2.0 and have those files be ready to upload it to the EPA. I know that's kind of a long-winded answer to your question, so I hope that does answer it successfully for you.
Okay. Is ESC Spectrum already prepared to support additional emission configurations for LME units?
I believe the answer is yes, only because, and let me tell you why I answered yes. Prior to my personal time here with ESC, I was a utility customer as well, and back then I was using StackVision back then to generate LME files for 9 different units that my company operated. So I know that StackVision has had the functionality to generate LME for many years now. Whether you choose to use StackVision to do that, or want to continue using the functionality that ECMPS has, is a decision on your part. But I do know that at least the Stack Vision tool can handle generating LME files as it is currently structured.
Okay. Is the EPA still supporting that there will be no dual system period?
Correct, correct. The EPA has said that there will be this transition period in which beta testing of the new tool will be allowed, but they have not talked at all about any sort of period where you can submit your files in either format using either tool. That is one of the areas I hope the EPA defines a little bit more clearly going forward and starting next week with the beta testing. It is my current understanding that, for example, between now and 2023, you can use the new tool to evaluate JSON formatted files, but you will not be able to submit those files during 2023. That's starting, during 2022. That's starting in January 2023. You able to submit your QA and monitoring plan and emission files in the JSON format using a new tool, like I said, in 2023. They have not said whether or not that is the only way to submit them in 2023. That I'm assuming that you will be required to use the new tool in 2023 and that you cannot use the old tool starting in January 1 of 2023. That is my opinion. I'm hoping that as we go forward through this time period, that they will clarify that is the situation as it's going to go forward. I have actually submitted a couple questions along this line to Chris Worley, saying, you need to let us being the affected community know when is the last day that you can use the old tool and when are you required to begin using the new tool. And it is my opinion that that will be January 1st, 2023. That from that point forward, you'll be required to use the new tool and you will not be able to use the old tool. But I'm hoping that EPA will clarify that in the near term. Next question,
Okay.
please.
If we participate in the beta testing, do you know if we will still also need to use the client tool to submit?
I do not know specifically if that is the requirement, but I suspect that you'll be able to continue using the client tool to submit.
Okay. Are you saying that Stack Vision will not create JSON files for stack testing data?
I did not say that. I simply said that you really should require your stack testers, since they are the ones that generate the data for you, that they should produce the JSON formatted files related to the data that they collect and create and submit it to you in that format. Since they're the ones that initially generate the data, they should be responsible. They should be held responsible and contractually be held responsible for them to generate that data for you. I hope that answers the question.
All right. During this beta testing time, will stack testers be allowed to test import also?
I expect the answer is yes. The testing with the new tool is not restricted to anybody. I would expect that consultants, that utilities, that DAS vendors, that stack testers, just about anybody involved will be able to establish a username and password to use the new tool to test it and to test their JSON formatted files that they will generate to make sure that they will become acceptable to the EPA. Matter of fact, I will actually encourage people, everybody, to participate in the beta testing process. This beta testing will last for about 13 months, and during this testing period, this beta testing period, the EPA is encouraging everybody to be involved in the beta testing process, that they will be very much open to helping people figure out any problems they run into or whatever else. And then in 2023, when they get into the production era, they're really trying to avoid carrying over any problems from the beta testing period into the production period. And so that's why they're encouraging everybody to be involved in beta testing.
All righty. I think we've got our last question, and then if anybody has lingering questions, please send them in, and we will get to those, but this is the last one that I have so far in the queue. Would ESC Spectrum consider the importing of MATS stack testing data similar to how the stack flow testing data is now imported? That way we will have one JSON file for QA instead of having to patch some information from ESC Spectrum and other information from stack testers.
You're asking a question that's way beyond my ability to answer you. The answer, I think the answer is, would we consider? The answer is probably, but I think we would need to know why you want to do that, and why you would want to mingle that data in your database. So outside of this discussion today, I would say contact me at the email address listed on your screen at the moment, or at the phone number shown there, and I can put you in contact with the appropriate people, development people here at ESC Spectrum, who can directly answer your question or consider your request.
All righty, that's all the questions that I had. If anybody else has any lingering questions, please feel free to reach out to John.
So with that, I'd like to thank you everybody for joining us today. It's been very beneficial, and I wish everybody a happy Christmas, and we'll talk to you next year.
Thank you, John. Happy birthday.
Thank you again.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.